Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Today I have an absolute assortment of just terrifying experiences that I'm really looking forward to sharing with you. Before we jump into them, a couple links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch is displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click the like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment and share this video. Why? Well, because all these things really do help this channel to continue to grow and go. And folks, they definitely do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump into today's upload, shall we? All right, folks, today's upload is jam-packed full of Dogman and crawler experiences. Some of those experiences were had by people in the military and the rest civilians. Today's first experience. This is something that I saw early June of 2009 while I was stationed at the now Fort Cavazo, Fort Hood back then. A little background first and full transparency. This is not something that I really ever brought up to people because I thought I may have imagined it. But it always stuck in my mind and gave me that weird cold in the gut feeling. I'm just going to relay what I saw. I was a big monster/cryptid/paranormal fan growing up and was always open to the idea of this stuff being real. The event. I was able to get my CO to grant me a 24-hour pass during the work week because my brother and his wife were expecting their first child in San Antonio. My eldest brother had gone on leave and was also going to be there for the arrival of our new niece or nephew. CO had instructed me to be back in uniform by 10:00 the next day. Pass in hand, I loaded up and headed towards San Antonio. From post, I would normally take 195 south through a lot of back roads and farmland. It skips a lot of the traffic on 35 and drops you back onto the main highway right before Georgetown. There really isn't much in that stretch of road, though. Mostly farmland on either side and small towns with 10 to 15 miles of nothing in between. Arrived with no problem to San Antonio, spend the day with my family at the hospital until my niece is born at around 9 p.m. that evening. I decided that I'm going to head back to post that evening, so after all, and head out at around 22 to 22:30. I pass through Georgetown and I take 195 north a little after 0200. 195 was dark back then. I don't know if it's gotten more lights out there now, but it was not a spot to be without a light source, especially after passing through the small towns. Streetlight maybe every few hundred yards. I'm driving along 55, 60 miles an hour and really haven't passed any other vehicles since leaving 35. I pass one of those rare streetlights and I feel like I notice something on the side of the road leaving the glow of the light. I look out my window and it's right there, running along the fence line on all fours, keeping pace with my truck for a good quarter of a mile. It looked like a big wolf with long front arms. And after looking at my speedometer again and back out the window, it looked over at me. I looked around for any other vehicles and switched my headlights over to the running lights, rolled my window down to try and see better, and placed cruise control on and started slowing down just a little bit. I could hear these things, and its huffing while it ran. I could see its jaws opening and closing while it was running. From what I could estimate from the farmland fence, its shoulders came up to at least 4 feet. Something in my primate brain said, GTFO. This thing had started to run at a shallow angle, taking it closer to me. And my big brain had slowed the truck down to 40. That made me hit the accelerator and get out of there. Seeing it start cutting back towards the farmland away from the road, I got to my barracks. Said, WTF, that was weird. Must have been dreaming. Shrugged and put it out of my mind because it creeped me out and made me feel so uneasy. So while I never forgot it, it's one of those things that just stays under your skin. I like watching cryptid or weird documentaries on all this stuff when I'm not doing anything at home. Around 8 months ago, I watched a movie on the werewolves of Texas. I knew about the Dogman in Michigan, but was surprised to hear that we have them in Texas. And my duty station falls right in that area. That's when I started to fall into place as to what it was. I just wanted to share what happened to me. Thank you for allowing me to share. Today's next encounter happens in an area that very often we get some experiences out of. Just last year, or about a year and a half ago, there was the brain sucker aliens that were attacking gold miners. And then the media told us that it was other gold miners that were doing the damage. Brazil had that horrific Dogman attack on a small village, Portuguese-speaking village, very isolated. And I have the video of the attack, not of the attack, but of the aftermath to the people. And they mention, you hear them specifically say, Lobos, and then translation, walking on 2 legs and such. Unfortunately, YouTube or any other social media platform won't let me share it. But this is a experience out of Argentina at a mining facility. I apologize about my English. It is not my native language, but anyway. I'm here because I want to share one of my experiences in the woods of my state, Santiago del Estero. I'm actually living in the capital city. That's the point of my career, and I've been here the big part of my life, by the way. However, once in a while, I got invited by my mom to pass the time in a cottage she has with a couple in about an hour out of the city, maybe 60 kilometers away. It is a beautiful place with plenty of fish in a humble river, and with a lot of wild animals like cougar or deer in a huge forest. One of the weekends of the winter 2021, I got invited to hunt, and I accepted. It was like 5 Celsius degrees at 1 a.m. in the hour where it is common to hunt native deer and hare here. It was cold. In the state municipality in which we were, it's called Laredo. You can find it on Google and look how it is as Laredo, Argentina. And it's an ancient military base, mining yards, close to where we were that day. I tell this because I think there is a relation between these creatures and the abandoned military and mining facilities. To the experience. The night got extended, and we had no animal catch, and how we were close to the old mining station. My mother's boyfriend, the one who I was with, had an idea to get there, and I love to explore, so I accepted. We listen, a lot of noise when we get to the house with the door completely broken. Then we thought, there's actually a deer here, and turned on the lights and silently walked because we didn't see another exit for deer we thought was there. Finally, with the lantern pointed to a square structure, we saw this creepy creature I did not believe existed. At that moment, I thought it could have been a homeless person, but this creature stayed staring at the light like no other animal. The guy I was with told me, WTF hell was that? And I remember not talking because I was trying to understand. This creepy thing screams pretty noisily, literally like an angry cougar, but more shrill and aggressive, and goes running to apparently a hole in the debris in that structure. We literally were outrun there by the confusion and dread. Then we got to the van and returned to the house to share the experience. I want to think that what we saw was some kind of psychotic individual who finishes like that in nowhere. Or maybe kind of a ghoul. Weird stuff. My companion thought it was a sick dog, but I know he has poor eyesight. I don't know if this stuff exists, but as I read before about that mining place and these creatures, I feel this can be something we don't really know at all. But I know what I saw was not normal, and I don't want to return there if I know that people who think like that walk around our house and shit like that. This creature was taller than a human being, 2.5 meters tall, pale, nude skin, with glowing red eyes and teeth like needles, what I could see of it. Thank you for reading. I always liked the experiences from different countries, especially like South America, Central America, because the way they word it isn't the best of English, but you really know that, you really have a feeling of them telling the truth, if that makes sense, because like they're just sharing outright, like they have no idea the proper words to use, so they just like almost like share what they feel, write what they feel, and hope that it's the right word in English. This is a really creepy one. And once again, at a mine. And here's something I want you to think about is these creatures, Dogman, Crawler, Bigfoot, and whatever Steph, the private military contractor, had come across in a few mines, one in Canada, one in the States, and one in Africa. These things are drawn to these mines for some reason, whether it be abandoned, whether it be because they're abandoned, or because there's some sort of power there. Just recently, I've been talking a lot about these creatures not being magic, but having the sense of how to use the magnetic pull and possibly the things that our brain had forgotten how to use after centuries of being pampered as humans, I guess. But this is real interesting experience. And it's a park ranger as well. So I was urbexing, which is urban exploration, at an abandoned phosphate mine on a night located in central Florida. Myself and a friend heard a noise I can't quite explain. For reference, this location is surrounded by nothing but farm and distant mines for about 10 to 15 miles, and it has been abandoned since roughly 2008. I heard the noise in question while walking down one of the roads after the sun had set. Like I said, it was just me and a couple of friends. When me and one of my friends heard this thing, it sounded like a retching noise mixed with a scream. It was maybe medium in pitch, but guttural. It was way too loud for both of us to have imagined it. It also happened twice, maybe 10 seconds apart, but far away from each other. I was a park ranger at my last job, and I'm pretty familiar with the wildlife in the area, and it did not sound like anything I had ever heard in my time working as a ranger near this area. I also have urbexed the location multiple times prior, and had a few weird experiences there, but nothing like this. Thanks for letting me share. This next encounter I shared Saturday Nightmares this past Saturday. Really chilling encounter. A few years ago, I met a fascinating guy who eventually became a good friend. Let's call him Chris to protect his identity. We both have a military background, so we spoke about some of our exploits in our past lives. He had an unexpectedly haunting experience to share. This took place on an undisclosed military base located in a damp jungle on a remote island. Chris says he remembers the wilderness being unnervingly quiet for at least a week leading up to the incident. The personnel stationed there chalked the silence up to a change in seasons or something. There had been reports of bizarre sightings, fast-moving animals no one could explain. Anyone who mentioned them was typically shut down with ridicule from the fellow soldiers. The sightings were notably inconsistent with one another. Some saw large eyes, others saw small ones. Some heard large things trudging boisterously through the woods. Others heard the sounds of something small and light sneaking around in the brush. No one had seen anything worth defending in an inevitable argument, let alone losing their reputation. Chris heard every report due to the fact that he was the desk sergeant at the time. Anyone who saw or heard something off, which could potentially impact the security of the base, would typically come to him and have it notated in the log. He never took the more fantastical reports seriously enough to actually write them down, unbeknownst to the concerned soldiers who came to him. Some of them came just to talk about what happened off the record. Anyway, this would typically end up with them just trading ghost stories for the night. On the evening in question, Chris and his team were on the far side of the island, a completely uninhabited area. There was no human presence that could be found for hundreds of miles in every direction. For that reason, the military chose that location for storing their weapons and explosives. Chris and a partner, let's call him B, were conducting nightly checks on the magazine storage area, which lies several miles deep in the uninhabited zone. The jungle was still weirdly quiet, but it was good for them, being that their mission was to detect foreign intelligence or operatives tampering with United States equipment, or the occasional refugee group that had been washed ashore. They were on the road that rested in the valley of two mountains bordered by gigantic hills, thick and rocky with tall grass. As they drove along slowly in the Humvee windows down, they heard a heavy thud coming from the woods, and it was totally unexpected. An unnatural sound emanated clearly from the tangled growth. The first thud drew their attention, but was quickly followed by more noise. B shut off the headlights and shut the engine down so they could sneak up on whoever or whatever was out there. They knew anyone or anything attempting to navigate the dense vegetation would have to do so carefully, taking time to avoid injury. But surprisingly, they could hear fast-paced walking rustling through the tall grass. After a few minutes, the sound began to move parallel to the road again. They restarted the vehicle and started to pursue the noise. The walking continued for a while as they followed it, with only their running lights on before suddenly stopping. They at first thought they had lost track of whatever it was, so they turned their headlights back on, assuming it was a deer or something, and continued a distance down the road. As B proceeded to turn on the high beams, both men noticed something in the distance, maybe 30 yards ahead. This humanoid-like creature jumped into the road and then into the brush on the other side. It was gray, over 2 meters tall, with a small ovular head. Its movements were too swift for its size. The best way he could describe its leaping motion was like that of an impossibly nimble frog. Seeing the creature instantly gave Chris that feeling of being punched in the gut. His heart sank so rapidly and the adrenaline kicked in so fast that he began to feel nauseous, on the verge of puking. He laments the fact that either of them had the will to chase after this creature, but that the feeling of being at such a disadvantage was absolutely petrifying. The idea that they were stalking it raised question. Were they hunting or being hunted themselves? Whatever it was, this creature definitely had the tactical advantages of position and mobility. Chris and Barry turned their truck around and sped off into the night. The woods remained silent for at least another week, returning to that normal droning sounds of local wildlife. Today's next encounter. Hello, everyone. The year of 2011, I spent living in rural Spain, Venta Maicena, a place near Orch, to be exact. Rolling hills, drop ravines, and cave house used and abandoned all over. One night we were driving home through the vast countryside on the way back to our place when I saw this thing run towards the back of our car and behind across the road. At first I thought it was a dog because rural Spain is terrible for wild dogs or abandoned dogs all over the place. But as my eyes followed it to the verge on the other side of the road, I noticed the size of this thing. If it were to be standing straight up, it would be at least 7 feet in height. It was running on all fours, a very sickly pale color, almost glowing in the moonlight, and absolutely no body hair at all. The overall vibe was more human than canine, apart from it having an elongated dog-like nose. The only way I can describe it is the weird in-between stage in movies when the dude is turning into a werewolf, and it's to this day how I described what I saw. However, since reading crawler experiences lately, I'm torn between what I saw, possibly a crawler or a dogman. I am not really sure. Today's next encounter. Hello, I live in a small town in Italy, in the region with the Appian Mountains, but I am on the coast. I am not informed about the spread of these crawlers, and I'm hoping someone can give me an education. I've read various encounters, and all I understand is that they are typical creatures in North America. Anyway, I had a sighting. I stayed up late watching a movie. At roughly 3 a.m., I decided it was time to go to bed. I went upstairs and opened the window to close the blinds to go to sleep. To my amazement, I noticed a figure in the middle of the street, a little left of the center. I thought to myself that I would like to have some binoculars to get a better look. The first thing that came into mind, it was two actually, was that it was either a dog or one of these cylindrical shaped concrete weights for holding signposts. The latter idea came from the color and type of coat of this supposed creature. which was turned with its back. It seemed strange to me that it was a dog because I remember a few times that dogs would run away from their owners here. Most are so trained that they walk even without a leash in the streets full of cars. And then what dog at 3:15 stands in the middle of the road and sees the horizon standing still? I had a feeling that it could turn its head 180 degrees because of the way it was built. And then I don't remember seeing dogs that size and with that opaque white color. Again, I thought it was concrete. I don't know if I gave an idea of hair, shaggy but shaved almost to the skin, gray and white mixed to give one shade. It was maybe 3:15, and I said to myself, well, I'll see it in the morning. Then thinking about it, what worker would place a concrete pole holder in the middle of the road? Well, I went to sleep, and in the morning, nothing at all. That thing was not there, and in its place, there was a parked car. I had never had anything like that happen to me. I tried to remember what I saw that night and just told myself it was impossible because of its size. It was bigger than a person with white fur, with its back towards me. Looked like it was sitting on the ground at such an angle that the left shoulder was covered by the body while the right shoulder looked huge. And here I don't understand because there are many descriptions of creatures and they all talk about them being very thin. This thing was not thin. It was grayish color like cement. It had, like I said, a little bit of hair, not long like your typical Dogman werewolf thing. Anyway, I had a bad feeling and closed the blinds and did go to sleep. I repeat, when I woke up, there was nothing there. Today's next encounter. When my wife was younger, she had a therapist that she saw regularly. He had formerly worked as a physician in the Navy. He was also an officiant and ended up marrying me and my wife years later. Anyway, he told her of a time that he encountered what he described as a dogman. This was the first time I had ever heard of them and is what got me interested in investigating more cases of encounters. I don't have all the specifics on where exactly it occurred, but it was a heavily wooded area in Georgia. He and his wife had gone to a 2-story cabin far out in the woods to vacation for a couple of days. They were far from the nearest town and there were no other buildings nearby, so what he told us is that he and his wife woke from a sleep at night feeling intense dread. They made their way to the stairs and down to the first level. When they looked out the window, they saw a creature staring back at them that appeared to be bipedal and canine. It was on its hind legs and walking as if it was its normal gait. He said that its head was a human/canine cross with sparse hair. It did not have a tail and it was snarling, which they could hear from inside the cabin. I know that they were not harmed, but they were definitely spooked and felt that intense dread. I wish I had more details, but that is as much as I know. I always wondered if it was a shapeshifter, possibly a werewolf. I'm not really sure. North Georgia is very heavily wooded, and there are a lot of national and state parks out there. The terrain is mountainous and hilly, so it's not ideal for farming, and there are not many major cities for that same reason. So it is very easy to find large stretches of uninterrupted forest. I've heard of another encounter in South Georgia in one of the major swamps. Thanks for letting me share. Today's next encounter. This encounter happened to a brother of a former classmate with a Nahal, a Mexican dogman. Well, the guy is currently a former classmate for now because we were in the same group while I took, again, a subject in which the whole group did a field trip from Merida to Rio Largos, Yucatan, Mexico. The vast majority of the group decided to camp instead of stay in a hotel, so one night this guy, who I don't really remember his name, while talking about the paranormal, mentioned that his brother encountered in a hall, which is said is a sorcerer who can transform into an animal like a dog. But he did tell us to take his encounter as an inch of salt because his brother and the brother's girlfriend were heavy marijuana users. I did try and reach him through a WhatsApp app, asking another classmate his phone number for a better version of the encounter, but anyway, this is what I remember. His brother, who at the time lived with his girlfriend in a house located in the wealthy zone, owned a dog, and behind that zone was a green area, so they used to walk the dog over there or let him do his needs in there. And while been there, one time the brother was with his girlfriend and she said that she heard a sound in the brush, and the guy claimed to have seen 3 pairs of ears above that brush, so they both got out of there. Also, there was a cave, which the classmate guy saw and claimed there is no cave, that's a frickin' layer, because it looks like something dug it up. Well, again, the brother, in company with his girlfriend close to that place, said that the place smelled like rotten flesh, and also heard some noises coming from out of the hole, like an animal being killed, and again, they got out of there. The last time his brother and the dog were there was dark, and the dog was taking too much time to find where to pee or poo, and once they both were on his way back home, at some point, the dog froze, and the brother starts to look at that same direction the dog is looking at, and that's when he saw it. It was looking in another direction, kind of ignoring their presence or not realizing they were there. He described it as extremely thin, almost like the skin was sticking to its bones, with a tail cat-like more than a dog. And when it looked at them, was like an ugly hairless dog thing. It just stood there looking at them till finally it went into the brush, and the dog starts going crazy on the leash, wanting to go home, and they both got out of there. And while the classmate guy told me about that layer because time before him they watched a movie, Godzilla perhaps, -1, I don't remember. They drove both of them to the green area behind the house to smoke marijuana, and the brother casually mentioned that's the place where it all happened. I truly hope I can reach this guy for some more detail. Anyway, this happened in April of 2024. These next encounters I shared, Saturday Nightmares, they both have a common area shared. Really interesting. I used to go camping at Lake Pentonwell, Adams County, Wisconsin, campground every year. One year, maybe 1988, my younger sister, 2 cousins, and I went for a walk after dark, maybe 10 p.m. We were young. My cousin and I were 9, and the 2 others were 8. There were some dirt walking trails in the woods around that campground. It was near the lake, and 2 trails intersected with a little clearing, maybe 6 feet on the sides of the trail. We could see a pontoon boat filled with people. Our young dumb selves figured that was a search party looking for someone, maybe even us, because we were not supposed to be away from camp that late. I know now it was just people having fun. As we are watching them, looking down the path going toward the lake, staying out of sight, a light orb came through the woods right to us. We were frozen in place. It was bigger than a softball, smaller than a basketball. It came in, circled us twice, probably 8 feet off the ground, and left. The whole thing maybe lasted 10 seconds long. I could remember it so vividly, like it happened yesterday. Next experience. I have a place in Adams County, Wisconsin, on Lake Pentonwell. It's a campsite, 5 acres large. I was partying out there with 3 people around midnight 2 years ago. We had the stereo cranked up when something started to growl and grunt louder than the radio, just out of sight behind a 35-foot camper. It repeated the sounds 3 times. I was ready to run for my life. I got to the stereo and turned it off, but did not hear a thing after that. I had my spotlight and could not see or hear anything move away either. It sounded similar to an extremely loud bull snort, mixed with a deep growl similar to a werewolf sound in the movie. It was so loud that even the people in the camper heard it. Just before this happened, the whippoorwills were going nuts. We no longer walk alone on these trails at night, only riding golf courts or our STVs on the trails after dark. Then, last year, we had another incident. We went out to the cart to ride around and heard a loud bark. I thought it was the neighbor's dog, but no. It was a huge white wolf. It seemed aggressive, with no fear. It was circling the camper with another huge dog-like creature. I have hunted at night and lived here most of my life and never heard of anything like this. It has changed all for us for life. There is definitely something unexplained out here. Today's next experience is a park ranger experience. I have been employed at a few different state parks around the country, but for the last 10 years, I've been a park ranger in Shenandoah National Park in Virginia. I just retired this past fall, but I do miss a lot of things about that work. Last spring in 2022, something happened that I was not prepared for at all. I've always been attuned to sights and sounds around me, and though I am cautious, I've rarely been afraid of much out there. The summer before, 2021, we had a remarkably calm season. There were hardly any animals we had to deal with, and it seemed the bears and other pests were leaving everyone alone. In April of 2022, people started to hear noises around their campsite very late at night. These noises would drive their dogs insane, but nobody had really seen anything unusual. It kind of felt like whatever was probing and checking out the area nightly, but it was staying far enough away so no one could see it with its spotlights. Then one night, as I was walking back to my quarters, I started feeling a profound sense of dread and unease. There was the most creepy, malevolent feeling in the air. I looked around and scanned the tree line before loping towards my door. I scanned the area from left to right and from the fire pit to the table. 20 feet behind the table, I saw a naked, extremely pale, almost gray figure. There was this large boulder behind it, so it was kind of blending in and not easy to see. If I hadn't purposely been scanning the area, I would have not noticed it. The thing had this humanoid quality to it, and it was very lanky and standing still. It was directly facing me. Then our eyes met, and I felt my heart drop. I just went cold. I probably only stared at it for a few seconds, but it felt like several minutes while my brain was trying to process what I had seen. It stood between 6 to 7 feet tall. It was low, slumped. The body looked to be frail. It was crouched down on all fours. I couldn't make out many details of its face beyond these large black eyes. Its mouth seemed to be open and making this strange clicking sound. It's hard to describe. The fear and shock that came over me was terrifying. I couldn't think rationally at all. I slowly pulled my phone out of my pocket and snapped a photo that seemed to startle it. I watched it jump up onto the massive rock and then climb into the tree next to it. The speed it exhibited was astounding. I ran like my life depended on it the rest of the way to my door, grabbed my shotgun and loaded it and aimed it at that door. I sat there with my heart hammering, waiting for the doorknob to turn or the window to break. I even called for backup. I sat there and waited for what seemed like hours for two of my colleagues to show up. I must have sounded like a blithering idiot trying to describe what I had seen and what happened. I was usually really calm and collected, which is probably what made them believe me. The three of us were well armed and went out together to look for it. We stayed out until the early morning expecting to see or hear something, but we never did. Eventually, at around 4 a.m., we lowered our guard down and went to the cabin to get some sleep. The next morning, I could hardly believe what I had seen that night before. I kept obsessively searching the area in the daylight to see if there were any shapes or items I could have mistaken that creature for. But the only things around were my typical campsite things. I really, really wish that there was another witness there that night for validation. I had to make my report, but I had so little substance that it felt ridiculous. I mean, there were no sightings of anybody else, and no one was harmed. There were only strange noises and people and dogs had been hearing, and my one sighting. So, what could I say? The photo that I had taken was dark and grainy, and you could barely make out the rock, let alone the creature. I kept watch again that night to see if I could spot anything, but there was nothing. The thought that this thing could be out there observing us is absolutely unnerving. It was also very hard to want to warn people, but not really have anything concrete to say to them. Thank you for allowing me to share. I've also attempted to have the photo analyzed by professionals, but the pixelation and darkness made the photo useless. Tonight's next encounter. This happened the summer of '67 in Veracruz, Mexico. This is where I was born. One evening when I came back to our neighborhood, one of the neighbors told my mom that she had lost her baby boy and that it was the third tragedy around the colony within a month. I recalled my mom telling my dad that night that she was scared and wanted us to move as soon as possible. My dad said we would. When she was done talking to him, she called me and my brother and gave us instructions to not go outside after dark, no matter what. 2 nights later, we are celebrating my brother's birthday, and after the celebration, my mom cleaned the house and put us to bed. Sometime in that night, I woke up for a drink of water and noticed that it was really bright inside the kitchen because of the moonlight. The very bright light was coming through the window above the kitchen sink. I was too small to get a cup from the cupboard, so I pulled a chair from the dining room table and put it right in front of the sink. At that moment, I happened to look into the neighbor's house across from our home and noticed that there was someone or something very big in the front of their door, and it seemed to be holding something. When I got closer to the window to see what it was holding, I realized that whatever it was standing there was taller than the door. It had large pointed ears with no clothing on. When I saw its ears, I jumped and the chair made a noise. This thing turned and looked at me. I saw its face. It looked like a freaking police dog with bright red eyes on its hind legs. And what it was holding was a baby. I got off the chair and ran to my room to my brother's bed and held him for the entire night. I was so scared I thought whatever it was going to come through our door and take us. The next morning, we went to church, and our neighbor told my parents that her friend across from our home lost her child the night before, and nobody knew how or what happened. When I heard that, I started crying. My mom asked me what was wrong, and I told her what I had seen that night. She told me that we were going to be moving soon and never tell anyone what I saw, and I haven't up until now. Tonight's final encounter. I come from a very remote country called the Solomon Islands. I lived there as a child but have since moved to Australia. For generations, giants have been at the center of many of our stories. From the giants that disrupted villages to the ones that would kill people at night and eat them. 5 years ago, when I went back, I was talking to our spiritual elder. They believe our ancestors gave him gifts that connect to the spiritual side. And he told me a more recent experience, so apparently a family from another village had contacted him about their daughter missing to see if it was something supernatural. Now, our spiritual man investigated. He didn't tell me how, and came to the conclusion that a giant had taken her. He asked the village if they had a giant population, and they verified that they lived in a cave not too far away. So he goes to investigate the nearby cave, and from the outside it looked completely normal. He said that he went inside and nothing looked unusual. But before giving up on the lead, he decided to try and blood sacrifice. Killing a living thing to use its life force is very common practice in our customs, to see if it would trigger something. He rounded up 3 hog and slaughtered them in front of the cave, pouring their blood out. He said he waited a bit and decided to go in, and sure enough, when he went inside of that cave, had changed completely. There were stairs leading down. The spiritual leader went down those stairs deeper into the cave. He said the plants he saw in that cave were unlike anything he had ever seen before. He mentioned them glowing in the dark, and it was one of the most beautiful things he had ever seen. He eventually went further and further down, and sure enough, there was a giant on a throne. The giant thanked him for the sacrifice and asked what he wanted. He mentioned the girl, and the giant knew who he was talking about. He demanded the girl come out, and she appeared. The giant explained that one of his family members had taken a liking to her because she was so beautiful and kidnapped her. So the spiritual elder asks for her back. The giant agrees and lets him go. She's returned to her village, and that's the experience. When I was listening to this, I thought it was wild, but I also know that giants are so prevalent in our stories that maybe there is some truth to what was said. Now I don't know what to think, but it is an interesting experience or story either way. Thank you. In World War II, in the Solomon Islands and such, there were claims of giants by the United States military. And what I said last Saturday on Saturday Nightmares was, it does make sense. Like this blood sacrifice. I don't know about the magic part, but maybe because he offered something that this giant was able to open this portal, not just a hole in the ground, but a portal. I don't believe that. It's hard to explain because, people, we tend to put the paranormal into the magic realm. But is it magic, or is it something just super natural? Is it natural? Portals are natural. Science has already established there are dimensions next to ours. That would make them supernatural. Anyway, but the military did have experiences with the Solomon Island giants. I've heard a few different experiences. I don't recall them off my top of my head, but I don't even want to attempt to share them and muddy them up. But yeah, anyway, I hope you guys all enjoyed today's upload as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. It is your support, after all, that keeps this channel growing and going, and honestly, what gives people a chance and a place to share their experiences and theories judgment-free, simply treated with the respect that we all deserve. Thank you. Everyone, please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, our pets, family, and friends. These creatures are real. They are out there and dangerous. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions. Never stop searching for the answers or the truth. And God bless.